Welcome, everybody, back to the MC65 podcast. Today, we are tackling a question that becomes incredibly important um, as organization when you modernize your infrastructure. What happens when your cloud strategy can't live internally in the public cloud? Azure has evolved far beyond virtual machines running in Microsoft data centers. Organizations are adopting platform services, infrastructure as a code, automated deployment pipelines, Azure landing zones, while at the same time, some workloads still need to remain physical, close to factories, office, regulated environments, or existing infrastructure. That's where Azure Local become particularly interesting. My guest today is Christoffer Clarkson Jacobsen, Microsoft MVP Azure specialist at Fellowmind in Denmark. Christopher designs and implements Azure solutions, work especially with Azure Local, Azure Landing Zones, Azure DevOps, PowerShell, and Biceps, and has a strong focus on modernizing security, automated and infrastructure as a code. Today, we are deep dive into how Azure Local fits into the Azure Landing Zone strategy, how organization can merge cloud and local infrastructure constantly, and why Christopher believes many companies are missing some of the possible Azure Local providers. Christopher, welcome to the MC65 podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Before we get deep into Azure Local, how did your own journey into Microsoft technology begun?
Yeah, so I have been working with Microsoft technology stack for many years, I think 15 years or so. Started all the way back when I was a student and I got to my first company and working there. So part time in school and part time at this company. That's how that education worked. And that was all Microsoft. So back in the day, that was a lot of Windows. So I was working on that. And then I've been working a lot of years in a Danish hosting provider. I did that for around 8 years. That was also based on Microsoft Windows servers. And then for, yeah, I think 4 years now, I've been working in Fellowmind. That is a company that focuses entirely on the cloud. So that's naturally we're going to be focused on Azure, since Fellowmind is a Microsoft partner.
Mm.
So yeah, I've been working with Microsoft for a lot of years, actually,
Yeah.
mainly on Windows servers.
Mm.
Yeah, but in recent years, more about the cloud also, and yeah, and hybrid cloud, as we can call it.
Yeah, I have looked a little bit what you do at Photo Mind. You are involved in both an Azure solution and actually also implemented them. How important is this for an architect to remain hands-on?
I think if you ask some of my colleagues or coworkers, maybe not that much but for me personally, I always want to be hands-on because I feel like I cannot design solutions and write the whole design doc and write the implementation phases if I do not know how to implement them. Because I think if anyone that has been implementing stuff knows that Sunday night at 2 a.m. shit stops working, and what do we need to do to fix it? That is where you get the hands-on experience that cannot be all written in the design phases, because sometimes you just some yeah problem emerges that you did not was aware of. So I feel like hands-on is very important for me, just to stay current with how do we actually deploy and migrate and modernize the our customers' application and their workloads in general.
Yeah, it, you have described modernization from traditional VM-based infrastructure toward PaaS and SaaS as a particular interest. Why are so many organizations still heavily depend on virtual machines?
Yeah, I think we see it in both in our Danish customers, but also in we have a lot of international customers as well. And I think that there are two main reasons, or at least from my perspective. One of the reasons is that many of the customers are running some applications that is very old, so we can call them legacy application. 20 years old application that must run on a virtual machine, cannot run on a modern path-based SQL server. Um, the other part is actually the IT department at those companies. If they feel confident in Windows servers, they feel confident that they can install applications on a Windows server. Sometimes they are actually also hesitant to get into the path area, and that is also I don't know if you can call it stalling, but it's dragging the modernization to pass also because we almost always find an application that could run on a pass, but that just didn't because it's easier for the IT department to install it on a Windows server.
Mm, awesome. Um, interesting. But let's establish the foundation. What is Azure Local?
Yeah, what is Azure Local? Yeah. Uh, I think some would say that, it's just Hyper-V and some Stores-based Direct. It's just old technology. But for me, really, there's a lot more to it. So of course, down at the core, we have some functionalities from Windows Server. We have the Hyper-V. We have the Stores-based Direct for when we're doing hyperconverged stores. We can, as of recently, we can also use external storage sand-based storage. So there are some core components in Azure Locals that are very similar to normal Windows Server technology you can deploy and run virtual machines on. But then they also have that whole um, Microsoft has this component in it called Microsoft Online Cloud, and on that runs something called an Azure Local Bridge. And so that is some key components that is running locally on this Azure local environment, but has the connection to Azure. So we can use the management plane in Azure. We can use security and governance features from Azure, and it comes directly down to the cluster. So for me, the main differences between Azure local and a normal Windows Server environment is that we get so much of the Azure experience out of the box. We do not have to do a whole lot of manual configuration if we deploy our Azure local images on our servers, connect it to Azure and configure the cluster. We are actually good to go, and we can run a lot of resources on our local environment, keeping our data locally, complying with um, whatever regulations needed and have that sovereignty that some customers are asking for.
Mm, um, I don't know. It's uh, can is it correct to think of Azure Local as simply Azure in your data center, or is that too simple?
In some ways, yes. Of course, if you look at how many different uh, products or services you can run in the Azure cloud, that number is huge compared to what you can actually run on Azure Local because you can run virtual machines on Azure Local, you can run a Kubernetes cluster on Azure Local, and especially on top of the Kubernetes, of course, there you can run all sorts of different services. One services that is actually able to deploy from the Azure portal onto Azure Local is a SQL's managed instance. You have to deploy the Kubernetes cluster. You have to deploy something called an Arc data controller. But once you have those components on your cluster, on your Azure Local cluster, you can actually deploy in an SQL managed instance. And you get the same look and feel as if you are deploying that service in Azure. And I do believe that more of these PaaS services will also come in the future. And one other area that's also very nice and have been there for quite some time now is the possibility to use Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Local. And I have built some of those solutions on Azure Local, and we use a lot of the components in Azure. So we build our images in Azure. We have the whole orchestration in Azure, but we just deploy the session host to the Azure local cluster instead of the Azure cloud. But everything else is actually the same. So I think that's a huge win for us. I know that as AVD or Azure Virtual Desktop can now be deployed on Arc enabled environments, so we don't have to use Azure local, but for quite some time that was the case. You could only run AVD on Azure or Azure Local.
Mhm.
So
Um,
yeah,
And what are the main workflows or scenarios where Azure Local makes sense?
Um, if we see a lot of ask for companies wanting to keep that data locally. So, in Denmark, we have recently got Azure public cloud data centers in one part of Denmark. So some customers may not need that anymore, but we do have some customers that want the data locally at their site. We also have customers that needs that 1 millisecond latency on their network. They want or need to have that application running locally, but still want all the governance and security features from Azure. I think on the other hand, we are starting to see customers asking for Azure Local to run AI models. So you can actually at this point now you can run Azure Foundry or Foundry Local as it's called. You can run that on Azure Local, and I
Mhm.
think that is something we are going to be seeing a lot more ask for in the future. That customers with strict regulations that must keep their data and the AI solutions locally, they're going to be spending money on Azure Local hardware. Because it's actually very easy that way to get access to the models and integrate with those on that solution.
Mhm. Mhm. And how does it work? I Is it, I don't know, I buy Azure Local, like, I don't know, Windows, CD and install it, and is or how is pricing working?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, good ask. Yes, of course you have to buy the hardware unless you can find a local provider that will lease the hardware or in other ways do some hosting of the hardware for you. But yeah, of course, besides the hardware, the Azure Local software is installed on all the nodes, and you connect that because you are deploying the Azure Local cluster into a subscription in Azure. That enables the billing, and is billed per physical core. And there are some billings for the virtual machines running on top, depending how you do it. But you can also use your own. So if you have Windows Server data center licenses with software assurance enabled, you can use those and use the hybrid benefit feature in Azure to keep the cost very low.
Mhm.
There is something about I've seen some talk about if you're going to be using the external SAN for stores. There are some billing requirements there that customers need to look into because that will cost some additional money to use that. But yeah, that's the billing. It is mainly built by a subscription in Azure.
Mm. So so, when we think a little a bit about, I say we are living in the everything is moving to the cloud times. Um, where does Azure Local sit between traditional on-prem infrastructure and Azure public cloud?
Yeah. I think it is mainly around the customers that can see the business case in running it local or have the strict regulations that they need to keep it locally. But I know and I acknowledge that a few years back when hardware didn't cost as much as now, you could purchase the hardware and you could run as your local. And if you kept that hardware for an extended amount of time, let's say 5 or 8 years, there could be a business case in that. Uh, in instead of running the virtual machines or what workload you had to run in Azure. In Azure, you can do a lot of things with reservations and cost saving plans and that kind of stuff. But anyway, but I feel like at the moment hardware is very expensive, and I see some customers they are hesitating to buy the hardware. I do expect that at some point the hardware will get cheaper again, and I think we will see that the business case may be in the favor of local hardware again.
Do you see Azure Local primarily as data center technology or increasingly as an edge technology?
Yeah, so there is this new feature I haven't got really the chance to dive into it, but there is this new possibility to run, let's call it Azure Local on the edge. So is a thin image that you deploy and use. It's based on a Linux distribution, but for most of the customers that is going to be running that, it sounds like it's more focused around running AI workloads locally. The normal Azure local environment that is connected, I really both when I talk to my colleagues and also if I talk to customers, I I I do use some time to tell them that it's not just if they buy 2 servers, it's not just 2 servers you have to patch and keep maintain. You need to see this as a local data center, as a local cloud, because that whole ecosystem around the Azure local is actually quite complex, and you need to understand what you're working with. Also, if something goes wrong and if a patch goes wrong or if a service go down, you need to know what you're doing and have some experience around it. So I think like um, both in-house technician or external consultants from our company and also all other companies, they need to know what they're dealing with. You cannot just put in guys that had never touched hardware, never touched Windows Server technology, and expect them to understand what is going on because there are so many layers in this. Yeah, it is basically a local cloud you're running when you're using as local.
Mm, mm. Um, now let us introduce to a second major part of our discussion, Azure landing zones. For someone who's new to the concept, what problem does an Azure landing zone solve?
Yeah, I think that is a question I've been asked a lot, and of course, since I work in a team in Philemon that delivers this Azure landing zone concept based on Microsoft's cloud adoption framework concept. It's I think it's for many people that is used to Azure but not used to that concept. It can be a bit a bit tricky to understand at first. But the concept is that you need when you're working with Azure, you need to build structure. You need to build guardrails. You need to ensure that an application owner cannot access your firewall. You need to make sure that the support consultants cannot go in and modify your logging solution. So the whole point of a landing zone is that you have the platform landing zones or the platform subscriptions. That is something like connectivity, so firewalls and routing that stuff. You can have identity. That could be if you're still running domain controllers. That could be that, or it could be managed identities, that kind of stuff. And and then you have the landing zones for the applications, and each landing zone should represent a application or solution. So think of it like if a customer has an application, it could be their ERP system, their finance system. That
Mhm,
should live in a landing zone. And typically, a landing zone exists of multiple environments. So, in terms of an environment, that could be a development environment, a testing environment, a production environment. It could be a pre production environment, or yeah, there are different kinds of environments in that landing zone. And the purpose of that is that it is very divided. So if we go back to that ERP system, they want to develop it and have a development area that would go into one environment in the landing zone, and one environment is equal a subscription. So if you say this landing zone has a demo test and a prod, that is actually free subscriptions, and the resources would typically be deployed 3 times in that demo test and production subscription. But it is to keep a very tight and very secure um, guardrail around our applications, because customers that do not use landing zone concept, they tend to use one subscription, put many applications in, put a mix of their test and production system. They totally lose the overview. They have no idea, is that application running in that database? Is that production or is it test? Or maybe it is a database server that is running both, and it's very hard for them to manage. It's hard for them to secure, and it's hard for them to decommission if the application needs to go at some point. So that is one of the main things about landing zone is keeping it tight. And when we dig into what we are using in landing zones, we are using things like Azure policy to make governance. We use the tagging solution in Azure to tag all resources within the subscriptions in the landing zone. So again, that is some of the mechanisms we can use to have that governance for those landing zones.
Awesome. Okay, this was a good architectural overview. I think we have now a lot of topics. Let us start is um, with management groups. Where did they fit into this design?
Yeah, so management group, that is the logical separation that is used when you are building the landing zone concept. So at the top we have a, let's call it a parent or a main management group, and below that you typically have the platform management group, and below that that is where all the platform landing zones lives. Then again, you can have a below the main management group, you can have a management group for the corporate landing zones and the online landing zones, and also actually for the local landing zones, because quite recently Microsoft added this local management group to the management groups overview to have that same feature for Azure Local. Um, but that is what we use management group for. The management groups have the functionality of we can assign Azure policies to them, we can deploy to them, we can use RBAC, so we can set permissions on the management group scope. So there's an extra and actually quite great layer to build the structure that we use often. Yeah.
And I think the when we talk about this landing zone, the other most spoken word is subscriptions. How should organization thinks about subscriptions?
Yeah, so from my point of view, we really should stop think as a subscription as a container of everything. We need to see subscription as just environments. If we think of it like I'm talking about in the landing zone design, a subscription should only contain a subset of resources. It should not be a mix of all everything. One subscription should not contain both firewall resources and logging resources and SQL databases. That is t- too many resources for one subscription to live in. I acknowledge that if you are a very small customer with very few resources, it may be a bit overwhelming and maybe overkill, as you can say, to use this concept. But for most customers in Azure, they really need to use this concept.
Mm,
Um,
mm, mm. And what role does the Azure policy play?
As a policy, you can do several things. So there's the audit mode. We have a lot of regulations customers need to apply to. It could be in Europe. We have the GDPR. It can be SOC 2. It can be NIST. I think it's called. Um, Most of those policy initiatives are actually built in from Microsoft and ready to use. We just assign them. They are mostly auditing. And I know we have Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark initiative that it can also do some denying effects. But if we were just finishing the audit mode, a lot of Azure policies can be used to audit your environment. So say that you have deployed a storage account and you have used less secure settings, that would trigger one of the policies and the initiative to go in a non-compliant state, and you can see that in the Azure policy overview, and you can see that resource needs to be fixed to be compliant. That's for
Mm,
the audit part, but we also have the deploy if not exist part. So you can deploy extensions to machines, and you can deploy resources actually. And then you have the blocking or the deny effect. So the policies is also able to deny things. It could be that you are only allowing users to deploy in certain regions in Azure, and that could be one of the policies to use. Or you could deny that they are deploying a storage account with the public access available. It will use for many things, and we use that a lot. We have used both of a lot of built-ins from Microsoft and from third parties, and also some custom written policies. As a policy is great. It's time consuming, and you need to use some time to understand it. but once you get a grip on it, it can do so many things in Azure and also on Azure Local. Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, we have said it before, but how important are identity and airbag and in the landing zone architecture from your perspective?
Yes, it's very important. I think one of the main reasons to use learning zone is to have that strict security, or let's call it zero trust configuration
Oh,
set up, and you use the principle of least privilege. So at every scope within the landing zone on the management groups or in every subscription in the landing zone, you have entry ID groups that you apply to users, so they have just the right amount of permissions, but
oh,
not more than that. And also, since we are working a lot with infrastructure as code and automated deployments, where we are going to be using service principals, that they need to have access as well. And you can control that in the same way. So I think, yeah, that's a very good area also to understand when working with landing zones. That don't go ahead and put yourself and everyone else as owner on the top management group.
uh,
That's way too risky. So you use the features and the possibilities in the landing zone concept to have that zero trust
mm,
configuration done.
yeah, yeah, Microsoft has these reference architecture. Um, how deep should organized follow it, and when makes sense, yeah, doing modifications or
Mm.
custom.
Yeah, good question. I think in our company, we actually want customers to follow the best practices as much as possible. And we do have some discussions sometimes with customers that want to do it their own way and maybe do it not as strictly secure as we want them to. But I feel like for the most part, we get the discussion in and we get them convinced to do it the proper way. We also all the time asked to go in and assess solutions in Azure built by us or built by us. And again, we always want them to be as secure as possible and to follow the best practices as much as possible. Because in the end, I believe that the best practices that Microsoft has written is a great way to build your environments.
Mhm. And how does the Azure Local, the Azure Cloud, standard Azure, I don't know, and Azure Landing fits zones fit together?
Yeah. So in the past, when we were deploying as a local, we did not have the possibility to use multiple subscriptions or multiple resource groups. So at first, it was sort of limited. You deployed as a local into one subscription into one resource group, and everything was just sat there. But some time ago, it was changed a lot. So as of right now, we can use multiple subscriptions and we can use multiple resource groups. And that actually enables us to use the landing zone design when we are deploying Azure Local. And that I think that's a huge win and a great feature addition that Microsoft did some time ago. Because when we can deploy the Azure Local cluster itself
Mm,
into one subscription, let's call it a control plane or a management plane or something like that. And then you can use additional subscriptions to have your workloads in. That could be if you are traditional customers running with domain controllers, you want them to be tier zero and you want them to be in a separate subscription. That is actually now possible with Azure Local. And again, for member servers, you can have additional tier one subscriptions. And if you're running as a virtual desktop, I believe they should be considered tier two because they host end user activity. So we have now the possibility to use the tiering model also because we can use multiple subscription. Everything that would then sit inside a landing zone. So if you think of the management group layer, we will have that local management group Below that, we will have another management group that is named after this landing zone we are going to deploy for this as a local cluster. And below that, we will have a minimum of 4 subscriptions, so the control plane subscription and then tier 0, 1, and 2 subscriptions for the workloads. And also, if you're running Kubernetes, you can do additional subscriptions for that as well. Um, so that
Oh,
I think that's a great way to design. I know others, other Microsoft MVPs has written a lot about how to use Azure Arc when you are using Azure Arc on your on-premise servers. And again, for domain controllers, they should be treated as tier 0. How to keep them secure? That was I feel like that was a headache before, but now I think Microsoft have solved that, and we can deploy T0 into their own subscription, and we can really make tight security around that subscription. So no one without the need can access the servers via Azure, because every server, every virtual machine that you deploy in Azure Local will automatically be Arc enabled, and you can
mm,
manage the servers via Azure.
um, yeah. Um, interesting, interesting. I think another topic, it's hard to ignore. Well, yeah, we 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 can't really discuss Azure Local without talking about Azure Arc. What role does Azure Arc play?
Mm. Yeah, so I think I think Azure Arc is like the ultimate connector between our on-prem and our cloud. Azure Arc can run on almost everything. I think nowadays it can run on Windows servers, and it can run and select Linux distributions. It can run outside of as a local. So if you have something running on VMware or Hyper-V, or if you have it running in another data center, it could be AWS or another hosting provider. You can Arc enable those machines, and by an Arc enabling, you are enabling the features that is within Azure Cloud. So say things like you can use Microsoft Defender for Cloud, you can use Azure Policy, you can use Azure Update Manager. Um, so I think some of those features are really great, and there's a whole matrix of what features you can do when you Arc enable your virtual machines. But the Azure Arc is the connector that is connecting our on-prem um, to our Azure cloud.
Okay. Uh, so would it be fair to say the Azure Arc is one of the technology make the boundary between cloud and on-premise increasingly irrelevant?
Yeah, yeah. So I do believe that Azure Arc is the boundary. It is what enabled us to connect almost everything outside of Azure Cloud into Azure Cloud for management, governance, security. It really enabled us to have our um, daily maintenance task within one day, one management pane. So administrators can go into the Azure cloud and they can monitor all their workloads, regardless of where they are running physically speaking.
Mm, mm, okay. Um, how does Azure Arc change the way administrators manage the local infrastructure?
Hmm. I guess for some people, I know I have myself in the past, in other companies I worked at. So you use a lot of different third-party solutions to have that monitoring and the management and the patching, installing security. So I think for most servers and for most companies, they are using a whole lot of different products, third-party products, to manage the servers. And I do believe that Microsoft solved that issue by having Azure Arc, so you can use um, one product really to enable all of those functionalities. So both the monitoring, the patching, installing security, keeping them up to date, govern them, use machine configurations to keep them at a correct configuration level. All those things is enabled by Azure Arc. Um, Also, of course, I work in a company that we are deeply connected to Microsoft, and we want to provide Microsoft product to our customers.
Mm,
But that being said, I really truly honest believe that this product, Azure Arc and the Azure Cloud, is so good that many customers, if they're not always switching from some other products to this product, they should be looking very seriously into it because I think the feature matrix is quite comprehensive. We can do a lot of things with Azure Arc.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I think another topic, especially when we think about all people speak about infrastructure as a code. How important is it is this topic for Azure local?
Mm. Um, yeah, good question. You can deploy the whole stack, and you can deploy workloads. You can deploy everything actually with infrastructure as code, and I have done it before, and have done it also with customers. Um, I would guess and I would suspect that some customers that is going to be deploying Azure Local themselves will will not use the infrastructure as code method to deploy it. That's totally fair. Um, but I think if you're going to be doing a thing more than once, you should automate it. You should write code for it, and you should use infrastructure as code.
Mm,
Um, Think
uh,
of an example about Azure Virtual Desktop. So if you're running Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Local, there are going to be some maintenance tasks that's going to be recurrent. They can be automatically handled with infrastructure as code and perform very well. So that is actually a use case where I would recommend customers not to build it from scratch. Build everything with infrastructure as code because that will. I know it's maybe a time consuming at first, but over the long on over the next few years, it will save the IT department hours. That's for sure.
mhm.
Um, yeah.
Um, yeah, I have seen in your profile you stay on the bicep side of infrastructure as a code. Why bicep and why not Terraform?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I haven't really made that much thought decisioning about it. It came quite naturally for me that we were a few years back when I really started working on infrastructure as code. We started on Azure DevOps and we started with Bicep. I think for some of the guys like myself, I have been writing PowerShell scripts for many years, and I think that the transition from using only PowerShell to using PowerShell together with Bicep, and also nowadays maybe not PowerShell that much, but it can work as a executioner. But we use a lot of REST call also when we deploy. But I think the uses of PowerShell together with Bicep, I would suspect that for many, including myself, it's quite easy to get started with and get used to it. The Bicep language is easy to understand. That if you are writing Bicep and VS Code, for example, and have the extensions installed, it's quite helpful, and it's going to tell you, oh, you cannot use that syntax, so this is wrong because, again. So it's I feel it's quite easy to use and to get working. But I have not spent time with Terraform, so actually I cannot say. It's just because that is what felt natural for me and what I've been doing for the past years.
Okay. Um, yeah, I think the what also interesting is it's all saying actually GitHub. But yeah, Azure locally, I think the Azure DevOps makes sense. What role does Azure DevOps play in your infrastructure deployments?
Yeah, so actually we use Azure DevOps for many things. we use it for our repositories in our DevOps projects, but also we use the service connections to deploy into Azure and to deploy into Azure Local. It's super easy in Azure DevOps to set up a service connection that hooks into Azure, and if it's connected to Azure, it can connect to Azure Local also because it's provided by Microsoft and super easy to set up. There are also other features in there, also the board feature and yeah, the development tracking. If we are running a project, we are also using that. Um, I also use GitHub and do that. But yeah, in terms of Azure and deploying to Azure and Azure Local, and for me, it's just very easy to use DevOps because it's so so fast to set up and everything is like configured by Microsoft. You just have to go through a few visas and you've had permissions on the setup. You can even go in and set up a Azure DevOps managed agent pool if you need to run your custom scripts and you need to use your own DevOps agents. It's very easy to set up and get started with.
And you run this local on Azure Local. um, um, I think a little, yeah. But, at the DevOps Thema, can you a little bit walk us through a typical pipeline from a developer changing infrastructure code to that's infrastructure appearing in Azure?
Yeah, let me see if I can answer that question in a good way. So, it can be just as simple as writing the bicep template to deploy certain amount of resources and use a simple pipeline to deploy that into Azure. It
Yeah.
can also be more extensive where you use integration tests. So if you have maybe parameter files with some parameters in, and you want to test that they are correctly uh, containing the correct data, you can have certain kind of tests, and you can use different kind of linders also to test. If you want to use pipelines also to check if you're secure. So some of the pipeline steps could be to check if your code is secure. I think that maybe it's not commonly used for infrastructure code, but I know it is for application code. And then you deploy your code. Something that can be useful is also to if you write up what you're expecting to be deployed, you can use that as a pre-deployment check and a post-deployment check. So think of it like you are writing your recipe. What do you expect to deploy into Azure? Then you do the actual deployment in another stage in the pipeline, and then after that you do another stage where you check and actually check the resource in Azure. Were they correctly deployed? Were there some errors? Were were there some differences where my recipe just does not line up with my deployment? That can be super useful for if you're running a bit more complex pipeline deployment.
Mm. Um, I have seen in your profile you also working on the fellow mind management platform. What is the fellow mind management platform? What problems do it try to solve?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I know a fellow of mine will be happy that I spent time telling you about the fellow of mine managed platform. We call it the FMP. So in the essence, FMP is a turnkey solution to Azure Cloud. We are also looking into adding features for Azure Local as well. But if you do not want to spend a huge amount of time developing your own landing zone system and subscription vending, resource cleanup, deployment of new landing zones, how to manage your connectivity, how to do logging. ev- Everything within that concept is provided by this platform as a turnkey solution. The customer just signs up, they hand us a permission to go into the tenant, and we deploy everything in this is a managed method. So if someone wants to look into it more, there is a public site called fmp.filament.com, and there is the architectural design, and there is the matrix of what we do versus what the as a landing zone concept does. We have a lot of additional features that is not within the baseline from actual landing zone. Um, so really, yeah, customers. I know we have AI nowadays where customers could sit down and develop them themselves. Yeah, I agree, and I acknowledge that. But still, they would need substantial knowledge about how to design solutions in Azure. Just think of connectivity. We have multiple designs. So if customers want to use the vWAN or they want to use another network design where they may mostly just deploy a firewall and a VPN gateway, or if they do not need network connectivity at all the routing, the private DNS handling from zones, and if they have on-prem, they need to have a DNS resolver as well deployed. All of those different components they need to understand and be aware of. So, of course, in the FMP, we have the deployment of all resources, but we also have quite a substantial amount of documentation available so customers can really dig into and understand what should they do in certain situations.
Mm,
And besides that, we also give them a portal with a lot of data about the platform and
mm,
give it to them, and also for stakeholders that need to do decisions about cost and governance for the Azure. They may not be in the Azure portal that much, but we are
mm,
giving them a lot of data from that portal as well. I think, and for the last part, it's also access to consultants that know a lot about Azure and the different components, the resources that can be deployed, and how to design it. So again, also, if a customer has the FMP, they also have access to consultants that they can have the discussions with on how to design solutions within Azure and also within the FMP once they are onboarded to that.
yeah, awesome, awesome. But let's not jump back to the start topic. Let's return to modernization. Imagine that the company I say from that has 500 traditional virtual machines. Where do you begin?
Hmm. The step one is to get some access, some really good access, because we can use tools like Azure Migrate actually to do assessment. Is that tool has been developed over many years by Microsoft, and if you deploy an instance of that in the environment and you have proper permissions, that Azure Migrate solution can actually assess all the workloads within that environment. They can assess things like is the is each virtual machine overcommitted or undercommitted? Is it using all the allocated resources? But you can also see like things like does it have SQL Server installed? Does it have an web hosting like in Internet Information Stores installed? And I think also other application services as well. But um, then uh, then that gives us a good starter point to know what should we dig into further. Because of course, as a migrate alone as an assessment tool is great, but it's not complete and it will not tell the customer exactly how to work from there. So the next level is to assess all the application servers. So we look at what kind of file servers do we have. Could we put some data in SharePoint, or could we put some data in storage account? Could we put some data in uh, some kind of solution that has to run locally, and we can use that as a storage sync service, that kind of stuff. So just for that, just for the files, we need to look into what of those many new solutions can we use for that. And again, that's the same for the applications and for the databases. If they use remote desktop today, can we use AVD instead? And all those sorts of things. It can be quite time consuming to do, but yeah, we use things like Azure Migrate to do some of the initial assessment,
Hmm.
and from there we talk with the customer and we advise them on what to do. We build the phases because if let's say you have 500 servers, you're typically not migrating everything to Azure at once. And I know that some companies want to just tell the customers to just migrate all 500 servers and go from there. But To be honest, I think everyone working with migration should be honest about it. Once the customer's in Azure, the customer thinks, "Okay, I'm in Azure, good to go." But yeah, you just migrated 500 servers from one data center to another. You have not modernized them yet. So my perspective is always to if you have hardware locally and you can keep running that, let's start with looking at the modernization possibilities. So I do not want to move 500 servers to Azure just for the fun of it. I want to migrate them to platform solutions wherever possible. I want to decommission servers. I want to minimize the number of servers that customer has. That is always my end goal.
Yeah, you are not the biggest lift and shift fan.
I know, I hate lift and shift. And I've done it so much. It's not like I've not done it. I've done it plenty times, but it's just it's not fulfilling to do lift and shift. It's so much more fun to do the modernization, to see that the customer can move from, let's say, 500 servers to 200 servers, and the other 300 workloads were modernized to new solutions. And also, we always find something that should just be straight up decommissioned because it's not running anymore. The customers do not know what they have running.
Mm, mm. What did you think? What's the biggest opportunity organization miss when they migrate legacy infrastructure?
I think it's a combined of many things. So if they're moving to Azure, of course, use the features for cost savings, reservations, and savings plans, and that kind of stuff. You should use that wisely because that can save a lot of money, and they can also save a lot of if they have Windows servers. They can save on the licenses as well. I see that a lot that customers just don't make the decisions, and then they end up spending a lot of money on virtual machine that is going to be running in Azure for years. So that's one thing. And I also see a lot of customers moving their workloads into Azure, but just keeping the same level of integration that they did before. Let's say they were on-prem or they were at another hosting provider somewhere else, and they just moved the servers into Azure, but they do not take the time to set up Azure policies to
Mm,
actually govern and secure the environments. They do not use Azure Update Management to keep them updated. They still do manual updating or use some third-party software that they also pay to. Uh,
mm,
and yeah, so I think that's some of the things that they do not actually use the features handed to them once they migrate into Azure. Because again, as I said before, once they have moved into Azure, they feel like, I'm done now. I'm in Azure. Everything is good." But even things like doing some redundancy or doing geo redundancy in Azure, you have to set that up. You have to configure it. It's not just enabled by default by Microsoft, and that's also a thing that I think a lot of customers is not aware of. And we really try a lot to tell customers about those things. You need to maybe you need to rebuild your servers. Maybe you need to configure them a different way. Maybe you need to redesign your applications to use the features available in Azure to keep the resiliency at its best because we have so many features in Azure around that.
mm. Yeah, one thing all companies, CFO says, it's getting expensive, like more expensive. Did you see also we have the option when we modern yeah get modern infrastructure, we can also save cost.
Yeah, I think yeah, usually we can. Yeah, of course, if you take a thing like a very small Windows server running an SQL database on top, and you want to use SQL managed instance, of course that will be more expensive. But for the most part, we can save money by removing the Windows servers, removing the Windows licenses, using a platform service instead that is also uh, provisioned correctly and has the right amount of resources. And typically we can save money by doing that. And also a thing that customers do not count in when they do the calculation is for every server you have an administrative burden. So you have to keep it patched, you have to monitor it, you have to fix when a patch goes wrong. And every time you move from an infrastructure service to a platform service, your amount of maintenance work is getting smaller because Microsoft will take care of more things than before. Um, of course, that is not a nice to customers that and also turn on to companies that are selling managed services because yeah, suddenly we have to do less, but then again we can do uh, a bit less of the boring part about maintenance. I think we can do more about uh, con- continuously improving the customer's environment, keeping the up to date, tuning the environment, configuring it there because there's always the things you configure different to keep it more secure. So don't think we are not losing time in that sense, but yeah, the customer can save money. I believe if it's designed correctly.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, awesome. I think, yeah, we're a little bit running out of time. So I had every session a quick fire round. So five, six questions. You give a fast answer.
Okay.
So PowerShell or Azure CLI?
Hmm. PowerShell.
Portal or infrastructure as code?
Infrastructure as code.
Um, a quick Carlsberg or Tuborg?
Tuvo.
Pass or containers?
For my part, pass because I don't know much about containers. But if I do know containers, I would say containers.
So if Satya Nadella to come to you and say, hey, you get all the money and resources to make Azure Local better or develop a feature, what feature will it be?
So a thing running on top of Azure or local, or a feature that is developed by as a local team. I just need to understand the question.
Mm, yeah, you can do, you get all the money and resources and you say, this is what I need to make
Okay.
Azure Local the best product in the world.
Yeah, okay. I know one answer that me and my colleagues want. So we have this thing called hydration. If you back up and restore, if you have to move virtual machines from one Azure local cluster to another, they lose the Arc enabled functionality and have to do a lot of cowboy tricks to get that running. So that hydration feature will be so good, and I know Microsoft will do it at some point. I think it's a hard feature to develop, but we really want to have that possibilities to move workloads between clusters and keep them Arc enabled. That is my number one feature. I would really want to have really soon.
So, okay, then my final question is, Christopher, imagine I'm responsible for the traditional infrastructure at a mid-size enterprise. I have VMware or Hyper-V, hundreds of VMs, Active Directory, a growing Azure environment, and pressure from management to modernize. I don't want another isolated infrastructure platform. How would you approach design an Azure landing zone strategy where Azure Local and Azure Public Cloud becomes part of one architecture? And what should it do first on Monday morning?
Mm. I think number one is I would look into the hardware I had already because maybe that hardware could be upgraded with some other network cards or maybe some other storage adapters, and that could actually use Azure Local. And then next, I would look into what resources could be modernized into Azure to platform services to keep the amount of virtual servers as low as possible. And when once have done that, I will look into what servers could be moved into Azure and what servers need to be local either because of latency, regulations, or another third option. That would be my set of starting points to get started with looking at yeah, the signing of it.
Yeah. Then a last question: who shall I invite next, and what question should I ask?
That is a good question. Yeah, of course, since I work with the things I work with, I find infrastructure as code and I find as a local exciting. Um, I think there's a lot of things going on at Bicep at the moment. There's a new features going GA, kind of stuff. So I feel like for myself personally, that some of the things I'm looking very much into right now is what is going on with Bicep because there are new features coming out and really Bicep is moving forward and adding functionalities within the Bicep deployment. So for me, that I cannot pinpoint an exact person right now, but for me personally, I think Bicep is very nice to look into at the moment.
Mm,
What is going on with that?
Yeah, awesome then. Yeah, Christopher, thank you for joining me today. Yeah, I think one of the important ideas from this conversation is that hybrid cloud should mean running two completely separate worlds, and a local becomes particular interesting when organizations stop thinking about it purely as local infrastructure and start considering how it fits in the broader Azure architecture. So yeah, we have heard a lot Azure landing zones, Azure Arc, infrastructure as a code, biceps, PowerShell, and so on. Yeah, this I think this was a really cool overview. I'm very thankful for the time you've spent with me, and yeah, for the listeners, all the infos for Christopher you'll find on the MC65 Fam podcast page in the show notes. And yeah, there you see the work of Christian. You can where you can connect with him and all the other information. So yeah, thank you very much for staying here with me.
Thank you. Glad that you would have me on this podcast. Yeah. So thank you.